Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Dushyant Shahrawat, Director of FinTech Investment Banking at Rosenblatt Securities, to discuss where the FinTech sector goes in a tough capital environment. Dee, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Great to see you, Jill. Thank you for having us.
You got it. What's happening in the FinTech sector with the 70% decline in public FinTech stocks like Block and a much tougher environment for raising capital for private FinTechs as well?
Yeah, absolutely, Jill. It's been a very sobering time with the FinTech sector. To give a perspective to people, in 2022, S&P 500 over the course of the year declined about 19%. Nasdaq was down about 33%. But the FinTech index of 56 public companies in the United States was down 77% last year. So the FinTech sector vastly underperformed the broader indices. And as you said, even large names like Block, for example, which hit its all-time high of $275 stock price in August 2021, by October, it was down to about $51. That's like an over 82% correction. It's still only trading at $58 today. So Affirm, another darling in the FinTech sector, rode the buy now, pay later segment back in during COVID times, hit an all-time high of $164 in November of 2021. It's now trading at a little bit over $9 a share. So absolutely, colossal sort of decline in public company names, blistering pace of IPOs, notable companies like Robin or Coinbase in 2021, fallen off a cliff in the public market. So that's been the overall growth story for all growth stocks. But the FinTech sector, which tends to be, the way up vastly outperforms companies and the broader indices, and the down market actually does a lot worse. Private market has already also taken a shellacking. Funding to FinTechs declined in 2022, and through first quarter of this year was down 70% over 2021. This is private funding going into funding private companies in the FinTech space. While all sectors did very well during COVID, benefiting from 0% interest rates, the FinTech sector did particularly well in 2020 and 2021. It's almost as if the fire hose of capital was not just left open, it was simply left on the curb. And that situation has vastly changed. Again, going back to the private market, the biggest name in the private market is Stripe. And at one point, Stripe was private shares in Stripe on private market venues were trading up to about $165 billion in valuation, right? A couple of months ago, a month and a half ago, Stripe closed a $50 billion round, a $5 billion round at just over $50 billion in valuation. So you've seen companies like Stripe, which is the best known name in this space. At one point, privately was trading at $165 billion. It now is at $50 billion. So in a complete dramatic change of investment climate, both in the public market and the private market over the last 12 months or so.
So clearly, this is a major reset. Where does the FinTech sector go from here, including the 300 plus FinTech unicorns, or what were unicorns, waiting in the wings to go public one day?
Yeah, Jill, absolutely. I think very right phrase to use, a major reset for that business. Investor confidence, both in the public market and the private market, has been hit. In the private market, for example, investors have been, marking down the price of the stocks that they hold. For example, most recently last week, Schroders in the UK wrote down its holding in Revolut, which is a very large private fintech in Europe, by almost about 46%. Former high flyers like Klarna, for example, the Swedish buy now pay later company, in summer of 2022, did a down round, which was down by almost about 80% in valuation. So, but having said that, there is hope. If you look at the numbers, in fact, for year-to-date FinTech performance this year, the broader indices are up. S&P 500 as of yesterday was up 9%. Nasdaq was about 18%. The FinTech index this year-to-date, yesterday was up 37%. So like I said, on the way up, things are doing a lot better. Listen, the overall value proposition, I think, Jill, for innovative, well-run FinTechs remains absolutely intact. Using modern technology and a first principles approach to provide an alternative to large incumbents, that story for the large FinTechs remains completely the value remains completely intact. Now, is there going to be a culling out of the bottom quartile of FinTech companies that got funded in the go-go era of 2020 and 2021? Absolutely. Those companies are allowed to sell out or just completely shutter. So we'll come out of the situation in the next, 12 months, 18 months, whenever growth stocks actually start getting better. But they will be almost about a third or the fourth of the companies in the FinTech space that may not make it on the other side of this.
And next week,
actually, I'm sorry, just on the 322 FinTech unicorns, same. 322 is the number as of the first quarter of this year. But I would say that number is probably down at about 250 now, with a lot of companies that were just over $1 billion in valuation, now probably priced below that. So, listen, there'll always be companies like eToro, for example, that we know quite well, that's speaking in our conference next week, that as markets improve, it's going to come out of the gates and go public, in the next 12 to 18 months. But for a lot of the companies, the large fintech unicorns, it might push out the IPO timeframe by almost a couple of years.
So let's talk about that. Tell us about the Rosenblatt FinTech Summit next week. What are you guys going to be discussing? Who's going to be speaking?
Sure. Thank you, Jill. So we've got our 15th FinTech Summit being held virtually next week on May 9th and 10th. And it's going to be called, the Great FinTech Reset and, Blueprint for a New Era. We're going to have 11 FinTech CEOs of companies like eToro and others across consumer banking, insurtech, payments. They're going to be talking about what they're doing in this space, and an opportunity for people to hear from firsthand how FinTech CEOs are battling the challenges that they're facing on a daily basis. Challenges at two levels. One is securing funding, and the funding environment has changed pretty dramatically. And two, really headwinds in terms of revenue growth. So how are leading companies in this space, like eToro and others, navigating this environment? That's what we're going to be talking about. And then we've got 4 investors, world-class investors, that will provide an investor's perspective in how they're navigating their portfolio companies and helping them sort of grow and come out of this space. That's on May 9th and 10th, being held virtually next week.
All right, Dee. Appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you very much, Jill.